Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you all for attending. Welcome to this morning's Agricultural Leaders Roundtable. I want to thank everyone for coming here today for this discussion. I'm Travis Keisig. I'm a member of the Legislative Assembly from Saskatchewan and the current outgoing PNWER president. I want to thank Ken Day, the Director of Public and Government Affairs at Simplot, a great corporate partner of PNWER's, for moderating this discussion with me. It's truly a privilege to have so many experts on the panel here today. Agriculture is a foundational industry of many of our regional economies. While it's one of our oldest industries, it's also one that's always changing, and it's truly on the cutting edge of innovation. I'm looking forward to hearing from our experts and how they see today's agricultural landscape and what they're expecting for the future.
Thank you, Travis. I appreciate co-hosting with you, as we always do. As you mentioned, I'm Ken Day from the Simplot company. This panel has always been super insightful over the years. It's great to hear from ag experts, both in Canada and the U.S. And I'll say, there's always political noise, regardless of the time I've been doing it. But the thing about agriculture, we have to look past that, and we have to do what we need to do to plant our crops, harvest our crops, and process our crops. Both Canada and the U.S. are critical to the rest of the world. We not only feed our citizens, but we feed the world. And I'm looking forward to hearing from this panel of experts on how things are going to be changing and getting some new insights. So to start off with, I'd like to invite everyone to just introduce themselves and maybe share some brief remarks. Start with you.
I'm Lindsay. I'm the Deputy Director of the Oregon Department of Agriculture. Really happy to be here. Thank you. I would say, just in terms of brief remarks, agriculture, and you'll hear this from everyone, I'm sure, is really struggling right now. Tight margins, high labor costs, high input costs. I think we've heard this story before, but it's particularly strong for us in Oregon. Oregon is pretty unique in terms of the PNWER region. I think we're a little bit like the little sister of Washington to the north, but we're an incredibly diverse state in terms of agriculture. We have about 225 different commodities that we produce, and we have kind of the full range of climate and landscape all within our state. So that makes it incredibly difficult to kind of keep your arms around it, but certainly exciting and gives us a lot of opportunities. I think the most important thing right now that I think we'll be talking about is agriculture is really needing to innovate, and markets have changed really, really significantly. I think we've just had a constant step towards change. COVID changed a lot of supply chains forever, I think. And as we've adjusted to the post-COVID world, now we have, some new tariff realities that we're dealing with, and geopolitical tensions across the world. So I think in Oregon and everywhere in the Pacific Northwest, we're really trying to look at how do we keep our markets, how do we collaborate with our longstanding partners while trying to re-strengthen our regional supply chains. That's why the Pacific Northwest region is really important to us, because we really are an integrated supply chain, an integrated food processing industry. So this is really the area we are focused most on right now in Oregon. So glad to be here.
My name is Mike Honeycutt. I'm the Executive Officer for the Montana Department of Livestock. As you know, if you watched Western movies, Montana has a rich and colorful history. There was a time when farmers and ranchers didn't get along. So strangely, we have a Montana Department of Agriculture and a Montana Department of Livestock still in 2026 in our state. So I get the pleasure of leading that side of the house for the agricultural industry within Montana. We're responsible for animal health, disease surveillance, disease response, veterinary diagnostics, meat, milk, and egg inspection, Livestock investigation, if you watch TV, that's the side of our house that gets a little bit more press than we like. But livestock investigation, livestock inspection, and some work on with predators across the state of Montana. Yes, I like to tell people that everything about the show Yellowstone is false, except that the commissioner or the director of the department is very, very handsome. And so they got that right. They got that right. But just a few things of note about here at PNWER and why this is so important to us in Montana, Montana's livestock industry, and to our agency is that in the last 6 or 7 years, we have seen a lot of increase within our cross-border trade. Canadian feeders are much more active in our marketplace than they were even 10 years ago when I started at the department, and has become a very valuable part. So protecting that cross-border trade for livestock and that access for Canadians to come and buy, to participate in our marketplace provides a lot of opportunity and value for our producers. And so it's extremely important to us. The other thing that I would mention that's really big for us is that, animal health and cross-border livestock, which we'll be and always do participate in here at PNWER, is very, very important to us as we've dealt with high-path avian influenza a few years ago in Montana, a lot of testing for bovine tuberculosis. We're always dealing with brucellosis in Montana because of a wildlife reservoir, and now New World screwworm down in the southern part of the United States. Those are always just very critical issues, and very, very important to have these very strong relationships and understand what each other are doing and what we're doing to protect our herds, and most importantly, how that's helping us protect trade and the relationships that we have. So thank you for the opportunity to be with you this morning.
Thank you. I'm David Marit, Minister of Agriculture for the province of Saskatchewan. In our province, we're home to over 40% of all the arable land in Canada is in our province. We seed over 40 million acres every year. So I want you just to do a little calculation in your head. Average cost per acre in production, it's an annual cost every year, probably in the neighborhood of about $250 an acre, and multiply that by 40 million. That's about the amount of money that goes into the ground every year in the province of Saskatchewan for seeding the crops. Our biggest crops are obviously grains and oilseeds, canola, and pulse crops. And we trade to over 140 countries around the world. And our biggest trading partner is the United States. And I'm really looking forward to the discussion to get into the issue of obviously the free trade agreement. And let's hope we can continue on that pathway. I was in Washington at the NASDAQ conference, and Derek was there, and we had a good discussion about trade. And I was just in Madison, Wisconsin a few weeks ago at the MASDA conference and talking to a lot of my colleagues from the Midwestern states, and they all have the same concerns, and making sure that we can continue on with the USMCA CUSMA agreement. I'm looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you. Good morning. I'm Derek Sandison. I'm the director of the Washington State Department of Agriculture. I've been in this role for a little over 11 years now. I want to thank PNWER for bringing together leaders from across the Pacific Northwest and Western Canada to discuss the opportunities and especially the challenges that are being faced right now by the agricultural industry in our region. Agriculture has always connected our jurisdictions, whether it's trade, transportation, water supply, or innovation. The issues don't stop at provincial or state lines or even international borders. Our producers rely on strong partnerships, resilient supply chains, and predictable policies to remain competitive in a rapidly changing global marketplace. And I would echo Minister Marit's comments about the CUSMA or USMCA agreement. Certainly that's the underpinnings of a tremendous North American trade bloc that we've got to preserve and make sure it's protected going forward. Washington has one of the most diverse cropping patterns among the states. We produce over 300 crops and commodities, and we export a lot of those products overseas. So trade's extraordinarily important to us. But the success of our industry depends on the perseverance of our farmers and ranchers, and also on the collaboration with our neighbors throughout North America. Primarily again through CUSMA or USMCA. So pleased to be here today. Glad for the opportunity to talk about our major issues. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Tara Sawyer. I am the Minister of Agriculture and Irrigation for Alberta. And I am in my role, I think I'm around 6 weeks in. So it's a new role, but it's not new for me because my husband and I are still actively farming and have been doing so since 1903. So we're a fifth generation farm. So it's also, that means it's my first time at PNWER, and I'm really looking forward to the conversations that we're going to have. You could tell I was the newbie because I brought up my notes, but now I'm not using them. Tell me you're new without telling me you're new, right? No, the discussions we're going to have today are going to be really important. And I will say I'm in the last few weeks because I've had the opportunity to speak to a lot of our friends down south who came down, especially during Stampede, and was having a lot of meetings. And we're all on the same page. We all understand how important CUSMA USMCA is, and working together on that. And I'm not going to get into the weeds of it, but we rely heavily on one another. And for Alberta, of course, we're quite similar to Saskatchewan in that way with the grains and oil seeds. But we also happen to be the largest beef producing province. And a lot of it goes down to our friends who are part of PNWER. So when it comes to that discussion on animal health and that collaboration that we do with CFIA and with our counterparts, it's really important to us. And we've seen that collaboration be really strong, which is good. And when it comes to ag tech and innovation in this province, we recognize that diversification. So we have a pretty heavy focus we've put on value add and ag processing, because we do grow some of the best of the best, and to be able to maximize out, because it is a tough time for farmers. Very, very tight margins, and they're not getting any easier. So anyways, I'm looking forward to the conversation today, and thanks for having me.
Yeah, well, thank you everyone for that. And just a little piece of advice, Tara, as you're the newest member on the panel, Dave never uses his own notes ever and terrifies his whole team that helps him. So just you might as well do that right out of the gate and get your team members to get used to that. So with that, I'll just dive into the first question. You know, we're all aware of the CUSMA joint review, which will be a major factor for the future of North America's trade and supply chains. How has CUSMA traditionally worked for businesses and producers in your state or province? Anybody can chime in whenever they want.
Well, I'll start. I mean, this is a topic that's probably near and dear to everybody on this panel, and we could probably take the rest of the whole session to talk about it. We were discussing it even this morning at the table. I think it's really important that we continue on. And I mean, the collaboration between the two countries, but really at the state and provincial level, is something that I've really got to know over the past 6 or 7 years that I've had the privilege to serve as the Minister of Agriculture for Saskatchewan. And the business community also sees it. In Saskatchewan, we're probably one of the world's leaders in ag manufacturing on tillage. We were groundbreaking on zero-till. 95% of the land in Saskatchewan is either what we call zero-till or minimum till. And that has spread into Alberta, spread into Manitoba, but it has also spread into Montana, North Dakota, South Dakota, right down to Texas and right across in the whole ag sector. We're really seeing this minimum till or conservation farming and the whole carbon footprint being reduced on that side of it. But the fluidity of the ag sector moving across the border, I think, couldn't be more well-defined than what our premier did a few months ago when he put a video out of the whole ag sector where you buy a tractor that's made in Iowa and you buy a tillage equipment that's bought in or built in Saskatchewan or in Canada, and then the whole crop protection products and fungicides that come out of the United States and seed out of Canada, and the whole issue around it. And I'll give you just a couple of examples where, when talking to my counterparts, even in Madison and in Washington, and I never even realized this that I saw all this. But Saskatchewan is a big hog producer as well, not near as big as Manitoba or Quebec and Ontario. But one thing we do well is we supply healthy animals. In the state of Indiana, in Saskatchewan, we ship about 10,000 ISO wings a week out of Saskatchewan to U.S. destinations, either Iowa, Indiana, and probably Minnesota and other states as well. And I asked those ag directors why. And the number one reason is because they're healthy, disease-free, and we don't have to worry about them, and they get into the system. In Saskatchewan, we have a big potato production industry. 95% of the potatoes grown in Saskatchewan are not for food. They're for seed. And they go to Idaho, Colorado, Minnesota, Manitoba, Alberta, Ontario. That's because all our soil is disease-free. And it's been tested by CFIA just in the last couple of years, every quarter section in that whole area for that reason. So we become good at what we're doing, but we realize that our trading partners rely on us as well. And then half the time, those products are ending up back in Saskatchewan or into Canada as being sold as a food product. So the fluidity of the ag sector is really, really important. And one thing we've done from both the state and the provincial level, and when we really look at African swine fever and how we've really got into what we call zones now. And if there's an outbreak, how we can deal with it through the zone side. So the fluidity of the ag sector, right from a livestock to crops and all of it is very important, and it has to continue.
Yeah, I'll speak specifically from the livestock sector and very cattle centric in my job, obviously, because that's a big driver of what we do in Montana. And David and I were talking over breakfast about sort of this unbroken circle that we see in Montana, that if you were to go to Great Falls, Montana today and stand along I-15, you will just see truck after truck headed south from the border port, headed towards Idaho, Washington, Utah with fat cattle. And on the other side of the interstate, you will see trucks headed north full of feeder cattle. And so it's very important to both sides. We're not a huge processing state. So the participation that Canadian feedlots have within our marketplace in the last few years, we conservatively estimate that it's probably 20 to 30% of the activity that we're seeing in our stockyards across Montana. And we've tried to put a number around that, but losing 20 to 30% of the buyers at our marketplace in Montana for our feeder cattle conservatively could be as high as $500 million in today's market, maybe more. And to a state like Montana, losing $500 million of revenue is huge. And so keeping, through these agreements, keeping those borders open, keeping that flow is very important. And I know it affects more than just agriculture, because we also don't want to become, we don't want to see cattle become the retaliatory side of that if we're not doing things well. So we have to pay attention to the entire agreement, not just what's going on with agriculture, because it does have the opportunity to impact and affect us. But that's just what that agreement means to Montana from the standpoint of giving us those market opportunities and how we've seen that change. And also the thing that we don't think about in the processing side is on the U.S. side. Because I deal occasionally with people who want to build processing plants, and we have people in Montana who will say things like, I don't want Canadian cattle. It's going to be 100% U.S. cattle that we're going to do here. And I tell them, well, if you want to operate year round, you're going to have to open your mind about who you want to do business with. The reality is, if you look at those plants and we lose that Canadian influence that we have, how do those plants stay open if they all of a sudden lose 30 to 40% of the cattle that are being getting processed there? How do they operate year round? It could be a very, very key dynamic within the cattle industry, both on processing, feeding, and that's why it's very, very important to us to keep that agreement in place.
I just want to add one quick thing. I think that USMCA CUSMA it's been in place for so long that I think a lot of our industry didn't realize how integrated the sector really was and how close we are. I think in Oregon, a lot of our trade is with Asia, and we're constantly trying to establish these very difficult protocols in order to ship our products in for phytosanitary reasons or health reasons. And with our Canadian partners, we have had that cooperation for so long. It has been seamless, and it has to remain seamless. It's almost like a like a family breaking up when we run into kind of differences and we run into stoppages at the border or trade disputes. It really is so integral to our Pacific Northwest supply chain that I think that a lot of producers, I think especially on the producer side, on the ground, they don't know what it would be like if we were to not renew CUSMA. And so I think there'd be a lot of learning that would need to happen and a lot of rebuilding of our just supply chains in general. So it is absolutely necessary.
Sure, thank you. Okay. I mean, I don't want to, I could easily echo all of those comments for Alberta, but I think I'll spin it a little bit more and talk high level just on the importance. And you did hit the nail on the head, Lindsay, that almost like a lack of understanding of how closely integrated. But those of us who are heavily involved with it on a day-to-day, we understand how that collaboration works. When you want to talk about cattle going back and forth, whether it's going over to be like how much of our beef goes into Washington. I think you take 80%. It's pretty close. It's a lot. Nonetheless, so the conversations I always have with the counterparts on the other side, like talking to the group from Idaho actually during Stampede, and we were just talking about the importance it is from that granular level, those organizations being able to express to the higher powers that be the importance of that relationship. And yes, we can talk about diversification and supply chain issues, no question. But then there's the whole issue on research. And one of the things that we do here is farmer-driven research that they turn around and are able to use to do things, and how we can share that information with one another a little bit better, I think is something that could be looked at. But all that to say, at the CUSMA, USMCA, we all get how important it is and how we need to keep that going. And like we're hosting the Tri-National Conference here in the fall. And I spent all of, Stampede talking to all of our friends from the South who are down, encouraging them to come, and our counterparts from across the country. Like those are going to be really important conversations we're going to be having this fall. And it's going to be hosted in Calgary. So to me, that is going to, I feel really positive about some of the discussions that we can come out of there to get everybody on side to help us in those ongoing negotiations.
Yeah, so I mentioned earlier the importance of the concept of the North American trade bloc, that we're able to move products easily between the three countries. Minister Marit referred to it as fluidity. It's extremely important, but it's not by accident. It's because we attempt to harmonize our standards for phytosanitary standards, labor standards, all that, environmental standards, to make sure that fluidity can take place. So we're very committed. I mean, it's been USMCA, CUSMA has been extremely important for Washington State. Canada is our #1 export market, and Mexico is #3. I mean, that's not an accident. It's because we have this well-honed trade tool that allows us to accomplish that. So yeah, I can't underscore the importance of the agreement in terms of the continued success of our ag industry.
All right. Thank you, everybody. As I mentioned earlier in the opening, I always learn something from this panel. And I just found out from David that apparently Idaho's famous potatoes were born in Saskatchewan. Not sure how I feel about that, but we'll take it. Anyway, We're gonna talk about go talk a little bit more about the USMCA. I have to call it that. I probably get in trouble if I call it Kuzma, although I will say I was fine with NAFTA, but what do I know about branding? Anyway, what opportunities does USMCA and Kuzma present for Canada, U.S. agricultural trade? And let's touch a little bit on the integrated supply chains, how that factors into the broader goals for both countries, such as resilience and affordability. Obviously, affordability is a huge issue with both our countries right now. Whoever would like to jump in.
See, they all look at me. I don't know why I have to go first all the time, but and as I think it really talks about the importance of it. And from a Saskatchewan perspective, just the few key bullets, and I think it's important to do that. When we saw China put a tariff on canola and canola meal, and the concern we had around that. And then when 18 months ago, when we saw the tariffs, with the U.S. putting tariffs on, we were concerned from an agriculture perspective on how that was going to impact agriculture right across the United States and Canada. When I look at our trade side of it, and when you talk about affordability, I think you really have to look at the trade side of it because of the logistics around it. Probably one of the biggest impacts now on food prices is transportation. The transportation costs are growing to an exponential level now. I heard a number the other day in Saskatchewan from the Saskatchewan Trucking Association it's like $2 a minute in transportation costs when you're trucking. So the fluidity of the industry and I refer to that because from an ag perspective, we don't even really look at the border for trade. I look at the companies in Saskatchewan, U.S. companies doing business. I look at Canadian companies. I see Marit in the crowd. I know he does business in the United States. He's got facilities there. He's got facilities all over the world. But you look at that kind of fluidity on the food side and the processing side. You look at on canola. Everybody thinks of canola oil and what it is, but the dairy industry in the United States supply is very dependent on canola meal, very dependent on it. And in fact, California is one of the biggest importers of canola meal out of Saskatchewan. And you look at on that side of it and where it's growing, you look at even from a grain side, you got the pulse process or the passive processing plants in North and South Dakota. The Durham region in North America is so minute when you look at the whole scheme of the ag sector. It's a very small corner of North Dakota, Saskatchewan, into southern Alberta, and a bit of Manitoba and Montana. That's it for your world-class Durham and where it's growing. So you look at that side of the intricacies of it, and it's really important, I think, when you talk about affordability and processing, and and Tara talked about it on the value added, and we're starting to see that in Saskatchewan. You're starting to see more value added processing on the pulse side because it's cheaper to send out a finished product than it is to ship a bulk product out. And we're really being challenged as we are landlocked by the logistics of transportation. That is probably the biggest reason why we're seeing more value-added processing happening in Saskatchewan is because of the logistics around transportation.
And, again, I'll give a very sort of livestock, cattle-centric maybe a viewpoint to this. But in the comments I made on the last question, I'll reiterate those again. In the U.S., we're using about 70 to 80% of our processing capacity right now, particularly for beef. We definitely have lots of bottlenecks and supply chain issues with finding places for processing of lambs and sheep. And one of the things I get concerned about is we're utilizing 70 to 80% of that processing capacity across the sector, and that's with a robust participation from Canada processing cattle in the United States. So if there were a disruption and we were to lose that, what would the amount of processing capacity that we would use would be? And I should be fair here to say I did spend a little bit of time in my career working for a multinational company on processing of grain. So there is a break point that every processing plant has out there that at a certain point, it just is no longer feasible to continue to operate. And if we were to lose plants, we become even more susceptible to things like the Holcomb, Kansas fire that we saw a couple years ago and the disruptions that caused within our cattle industry, just taking one plant out of the supply chain. So our supply chains naturally, without these agreements, are going to be less resilient. They're going to be bad for producers. It puts producers even further into a price-taking situation than they currently are. And it's going to be bad for consumers because those supply chain disruptions, those bottlenecks that take place, we saw it during COVID. We saw it with other things that happened, natural disasters and accidents that happen in some of our processing facilities, that it is going to create price impacts on the consumers as well, and the access to that, affordable and very nutritious protein that we believe we produce. So it is just a natural order of things that if we were to fall apart, and I would say if we in the U.S. incentivized Canada to invest more in their processing capacity, invest more in what they're doing, and we lost that influence on our marketplace, it would make what we do in the U.S. less viable. That's how the relationship works. And to give an example, we're seeing it in Mexico right now. We've had the border shut down for quite a while with Mexico because of New World screwworm, and we're seeing Mexico make investments in their feeding industry, make investments in their processing industry. And the question is, if we're ever able to open that border back up, will we see that business come back, or will we see Mexico say, we think we can do this a little bit more on our own and without the need of our participation in the U.S. for feeding and processing? So for us here in the middle, and particularly as I speak centric to cattle, that is a very, very important issue for us, that we understand that what this agreement allows for us for our processing sector. And naturally, just the big point is we're going to have less resilient supply chains. We are going to have less good prices for producers, and we're going to have higher prices for consumers. That's what this agreement stays off.
All right. Well, yeah. So for Washington State, this is a pretty sensitive subject because according to U.S. Department of Agriculture, we have the 8th highest cost of production in the U.S. among states. And there's a number of reasons for that. It really started with the supply chain disruptions back during the pandemic. But certainly there's regulatory issues, particularly around worker or labor overtime requirements and that sort of thing, that's driving the cost of production way up. Well, that relates to competitiveness. If we can't produce a product that's affordable, we're not going to survive. And we're seeing apple orchards in particular. That's our number one crop, our iconic crop, Washington apples. What we're seeing, large orchards go out of business. I mean, just simply leave the market because of, a combination of high production cost and in some respects, overproduction, and then couple that with reduced demand, and we're sitting in a really unenviable position. So, it's our hope that through actions of state government, as well as a reemphasis on expanding markets for our products, that we can kind of grow our way out of this current situation. But it's certainly creating a difficult situation for Washington producers.
Well, and I'll say, given the volatility and uncertainty that we've seen in the last few years, I look at it as a bit of a positive. It did make us start looking at our processing more intentionally and focusing on it. I think we were behind for too long, way too long. And suddenly, when you want to talk about affordability and sustainability and food security, I don't know why it took us so long to start considering that value add processing piece. And it's something that works both ways for both sides. It's not okay, we're going to start doing that and then we stop our interactions with the U.S. Because yes, everyone always says, well, diversify. We're always going to be each other's biggest export, import customer or partner, however you want to say it. That's just the reality. And we all get that, but how do we maximize that to make things better for, our people who are trying to feed their families at an affordable rate, and still keep our economy strong, right? So I don't know. That's kind of how I feel about that one. If you could understand how my brain was going on that one.
I wanted to ask a question about screwworm, but Mike already answered that. And so thank you for that, Mike. But I do want to ask, in an increasingly complex global trade environment, what lessons has your jurisdiction learned about navigating disruptions, and how can regional collaboration help? And I'm just going to ask Minister Sawyer to go first this time and not Dave.
Don't make Minister Sawyer go first. Helps me formulate my thoughts. What was the question?
In an increasingly complex global trade environment, what lessons has your jurisdiction learned about navigating disruptions, and how can regional collaboration assist you?
Well, you actually are making this one hard on me. I'm not going to lie.
That's a hard question. I'm sorry. I'm not trying to be mean.
No, it's a hard question for me because I'm like, well, I've been focusing on this for 6 weeks. How do you want me to answer this one?
We're at PNWER. We want you to answer it honestly.
Been doing? No, it's not that bad. No, look, skip me for a minute, actually, because
Sure.
I want to formulate my thoughts
Sure.
properly for you on how I want to say this.
Give her Minister Marit.
I'll give her a 10-minute break.
You've got 4.
Yeah, I'll go for it. And obviously that's a great question. And I think what we tried to do in the province of Saskatchewan, this goes back, to Premier Moe in 2018, when we knew we had to start diversifying our trade, and we opened 9 international trade offices. And we have 9 around the globe right now. And what we're starting to see is a massive increase into these other countries that we were never before. And I'll just give you one example, and that's Vietnam. We were never in Vietnam 3-4 years ago. Last year, over $200 million of ag products went into Vietnam from Saskatchewan. I've had the privilege, as I said, to be in this role since 2018, and one of my first trade missions was down to Mexico. And in Mexico in 2018, we were doing about $500 million worth of business in Mexico. We are now well over $1 billion into Mexico, trading ag products into that country. And we're seeing that exponentially grow globally. Japan is growing. Indonesia is growing. We have an office there as well. So what we did is we said, we've got to start looking at diversifying our markets to other entities. The United States is still number 1. It is still number 1. And I'll give you a stat that blew me away when I saw it. I'll take the top 10 trading destinations for agriculture products in the province of Saskatchewan. The top 5 are countries. That's China, India, Japan, and Mexico is there. The other 5 are U.S. states. That's how important the United States is to the province of Saskatchewan. I can give you numbers, but they're just numbers. But I can tell you that's why I've been to Washington, talking to my counterparts in Washington. That's why I was in Madison 2 weeks ago talking. Derek and I would probably be in Flagstaff today, but we're here because this is more important than Flagstaff, and he's be the first one to tell you that. And this organization is really important for the province of Saskatchewan in trading relationships internationally and building on that. And I think we heard the ambassador say that very question to us yesterday morning, saying if we want to ensure that we're going to have a USMCA agreement, we as state and provincial governments are really going to have to collaborate and work together and make our voices heard at the national table.
So interestingly, I think that Oregon, we've kind of learned the opposite lesson a little bit from Saskatchewan. We have probably for the past 20 years really focused on expanding our markets in Asia. And I think over the past 2 years, we've really shifted that focus actually back to closer to our borders and are really more focused on our closer partners, and certainly on the west side of Canada. We've always had a really strong relationship, but we had not put a lot of put a lot of our energy, put a lot of our investment into strengthening that relationship. And it's been really valuable. It's a hard time, but that's when we have to double down on our relationships. We suffer, I think, certainly in Oregon, from a loss of ag in the middle. We talk about that a lot. And we have a lot of really small producers. We have a lot of really small value-added companies. And they can no longer access even East Coast US markets are more difficult for many Oregon companies than going into BC, than going into Alberta. And so we've really doubled down on that. And we're really excited about kind of looking a little bit closer to our friends while still supporting Asia. But that's really been our lesson that we've learned, that we neglected, I think, our regional trading partners more than maybe we should have.
Okay, I'll jump in. Thanks for the grace. So there's a few things, there is a few things that we did. First of all, recognizing our partnership with the US. Quite frankly, it's one of the main reasons why I'm sitting here right now is because Nathan Cooper was my MLA. But the first thing we did, we sent him down to the US so that he is in charge of all, 5, 6 trade offices that we have in the US, because we recognize and to build that partnership. But then within our own nation, that's why our premiers were like, we need to get rid of those border barriers within our own country. Like, what a concept. I mean, I don't know why it took us so long, but yeah, why? So that trade within our own country needed to improve. And then, yes, absolutely. Did we branch out internationally outside of just the US? Of course we did, which is why you see, us going to the AUE. It's why we're focused on Asia. It's why we've been to China and why we've gone to some of the smaller countries. We recognize we do have to build better relationships but those take time. Opening new markets still take time, which is why fostering the relationship still is as important as it is with the US, with our counterparts. It's why PNWER is such an important collaboration to have. How'd I do? Give me a grade.
Just real quick, I'll just speak a little bit to regional partnerships, and I'll harken back. If we've got folks from Idaho, I'm about to be very kind to Idaho in my comments, but I had a chance about a year ago to go down on a tour in the Twin Falls, Jerome area to a new processing plant, beef processing plant that had been built there. It was a joint partnership between AgriBeef and a number of producers who owned the other 50% of that, and many of them were Montana producers. That's what I was doing there. And they were able to build a brand new $350 million, 700 head a day processing plant, which adds more resilience. It adds more value-added opportunities for those producers within the supply chain to capture more value for the commodities that they're producing. And those are the things we're chasing. But my point is that we tend to be very place-based in our thinking. Would it have been nice for Montana to have that new $350 million facility sitting somewhere in one of our towns? Yes. But should I be supportive that that type of project is happening in a neighboring state and that our producers are able to participate in that? And usually together we can marshal the type of investments we need to do those big things, where when we keep it very state or province centric, maybe we can't pull together the type of resources from a government side to support and incentivize that. So if we could get out of our place-based thinking and think a little bit more regionally and think that if something good is happening in Idaho, that can be good for Montana, vice versa. If something's happening in Washington, in Montana, I'll give the example of Montana Renewables in Great Falls. We certainly cannot, we don't have the processing industry to supply them with all the tallow that they need. We certainly cannot, all the feedstock that they need to produce that fuel, but we're very happy to have that refinery in Montana, and that supports up north here in Canada with the inputs that they can send down. It supports our beef processing industry across the region, particularly in the rendering side, to get tallow to that operation operation to produce that product that we need. And that's an example too of not each one of us couldn't pull that off, but having a regional solution is sometimes better than trying to be so place-centric. So that's my encouragement to everyone out there, is to sort of get out of our place-based thinking and think about we just need to think, how do we do things regionally? Because we can do much more together than we can do alone.
So, Washington State has partnered with Idaho and Oregon in terms of marketing our products, and some of our products, pears, cherries, wheat, for example, as Northwest products, not Washington State products. And so, I mean, we've been doing that for years. I think it works very well. Our climates, our soils, and so on are similar, so the quality of the product is very consistent among the 3 states. So that's been effective. But I would say that Washington State is sort of Washington State agriculture is sort of hardwired for trade. I mean, this has been an essential component of our industry for for decades and decades. For example, 90+% of our wheat is exported overseas. 31%, somewhere there, of our apples go overseas. About 60+% of our potatoes go overseas. And so it's, trade, again, is very important. And when trade does not go well for us, our industry does not fare well. And I mentioned earlier that I think one of the things we're working on now is trying to find ways to expand our markets. We went up through a 4-year period with not a single new free trade agreement. We need more market access around the world to stay competitive. I mean, our country or organizations like the European Union, for example, have been very aggressive in expanding markets, making new trade agreements around the world, and that has cut into our market. We need to be, I think, more aggressive with respect to opening those trade opportunities.
All right, so this is a good opportunity to build on some of these comments. But before I do that, Travis and I are up here moderating. The panel's busy, so if there are any announcements come across Truth Social that we might need to be aware of, if you could give us a quick heads up, that'd be great. Anyway, let's move on. Let's build on your response. This is a reminder, we have the Whova app. If you have questions, please put them in there. And I'm going to take one of the Whova questions right now, which I think is a nice build on what we've been talking about. So we are in the midst of trying times and have identified numerous potential problems and crises. Given that, what is the nature, external and internal, of the joint opportunities for a healthy North American trading bloc? Would like to give that one a go.
I'm not going first.
Well, I will.
There you go.
Getting cocky now. No, what I would say is one of the areas where we have is in ag tech and innovation. That to me is an area where there are opportunities for all of us. And I mean, we see how it has grown. There are challenges with the adoption of some of these technologies and the costs associated with that. But I think if we can unlock more of that, that goes a long way for helping us. Because it helps our farmers. I don't know how else to articulate it except to say that to me, that's one of the areas when you talk about innovations that we could be doing and harnessing that for our producers. I think that's key.
I would say reciprocity. That's something that oftentimes in the U.S., when we talk about trade in agriculture, we focus solely on exports. It's not very popular to, focus on imports sometimes, but I think in particular in the PNWER region, reciprocity is super important. And because we have similar agricultural industries and an integrated supply chain, it's really important to remember that trade on both sides and going both ways is so important. I think about our wine industries, particularly in Oregon, Washington, and BC. the wine growers have cooperated over the past few years as they've faced wildfire, floods, other issues, and been able to sell grapes amongst each other in order to have resiliency when there is a weather crisis or something impacting their crop. I think it's a great example about how we have to cooperate as partners in the region. And so, you know, remember that cooperation, and we're looking at ways that we can also invite our producers from Canada down to, you know, experience our markets and be introduced to our markets.
I'll just touch on a couple of things. There's probably one of the greatest shows going on starting today in Saskatchewan called Ag in Motion, which probably is attracting 40 to 50 different countries from around the world to look at new innovation and technology on the agriculture sector from a grains and oilseed and pulse side of it. Now, I want to make one point clear. Governments do not do trade business. What we do is we try to create the opportunities for business to go into those countries and do business. And that's kind of what we try and do. I want to touch on what Tara said. I think probably one of the biggest things that I've seen in the last 20 years is research, expansion around research and seeing what it's done for the ag side and I'll say from Western Canada, Midwest United States. Probably 15, 20 years ago, you did not see canola growing south of what we call #1 highway in the province of Saskatchewan. It was pretty well in the north. Because of research and new technologies in growing canola and the research we've done on varieties to go to straight cut, we are now seeing canola growing in my constituency, which is right along the border of Montana. And I can tell you the canola crop is fantastic. We're also seeing it growing in North Dakota and on the east side of Montana as well. Lentils, which were actually developed at the U of S decades ago, are now growing right across Western Canada and Midwest United States as well. So we're starting to see that. And I think that's one of our focuses as a government. We've been investing between $35 and $40 million every year in ag research, both from a livestock perspective and a crops and grains and oilseed perspective, and partnering with the private sector in a lot of that as well. So I think that all adds to it. The new technologies in the ag sector is going to drive the economy going forward. I just heard of a pilot project that's happening in my constituency with a farmer that blew me away, where they are actually going to start placing fertilizer anywhere from 5 to 10 inches deep, and where it can actually stay there and be utilized for years, not be utilized at one time. I never knew this, that a lentil is like an iceberg. The shortest part of the crop is what you see above the ground. The roots can go down 36 inches looking for moisture. So this is all new innovation and technology that is really being driven, and we're seeing it in all aspects of grains and oilseeds and pulse crops in Western Canada, but really being driven by research and innovation. And I got to say, Murad's in the crowd, and it's companies like his that is helping drive that agenda too. Thank you, Marit.
So I wanted to touch on something Lindsay talked about. First and foremost, I mean, trade is a two-way street. We get that. You know, it's very important that we're receptive to your products in Canada or from Canada, and that vice versa. You're respectful and receptive for ours. But the other thing, she used the example of the severe winter kill of grape plants in lower British Columbia. Basically wiped out or threatened to wipe out the wine industry in British Columbia. And I mean, I personally traveled to Vancouver, to Ottawa, and other places to try to convince the BC government and the Canadian government to allow our grapes and our juice to go to wineries in British Columbia. And in the end, we got that approval, and for 2 years we've been doing that. And it's I was very gratified that the Consul General visited us in Olympia, and at that event, I was presented with a bottle of wine that was made. It was British Columbia wine, but made with Washington grapes, and that was a great success. But I think it's just really important again that that as we go forward, again, we're the North American bloc, and we got to stand up for each other and make sure that that we're getting good free access of products among the three countries. And so, I just remain ever hopeful. I am disappointed that the U.S. chose not to do the 16-year automatic extension. And one of the things that's important to agriculture is predictability. And when we have a situation like that, it's a year-to-year negotiation. It's not predictable. And so we've got to sort of be ever supportive of building predictability around our industry.
Yeah, I know that's a great comment. It's something that I hear from, doesn't matter what industry, whether it's agriculture, whether it's resource sector, manufacturing, certainty is what business owners want when they're making investments on either side of the 49th parallel. I just want to quickly comment and thank Minister Marit for coming to PNWER over Ag in Motion. It is one of the largest outdoor agricultural expos in North America and in Saskatchewan, and just want to thank Minister Marit for choosing PNWER over Ag in Motion. I just want to kind of pivot and just listen to the panel's thoughts on what are some of the challenges and opportunities in the biofuel market with ethanol, biodiesel, and sustainable aviation fuel. What do you see as the future of those markets, and is there opportunities, and what challenges are present?
Well, I'll start on it. I think there's obviously, as a farmer all my life, and as soon as I have 2 or 3 entities that want my product, I love that because it does obviously drive up the price when that happens. Right now, probably some of you in the room are quite aware that we do ship a lot of canola oil into the United States that is actually used for biodiesel and is actually shipped back into Canada. Canada is the biggest importer of U.S. biofuels, and that side of it. So we see that side. The same thing when you see in the United States with their ethanol and what it has done with the corn industry. If you're a corn grower in the United States, you love it that somebody wants your product not only for food, but they want it for fuel as well. It obviously becomes an issue on the political spectrum on, are we growing agricultural products for food or fuel, right? And so there's always that discussion and that issue around that. I think it depends on where the governments go on at a federal level on whether it's mandated. Obviously, it has to be subsidized, and that becomes a challenge as well. So, as I say, as a farmer, I'm always appreciative of the fact that somebody else wants my product as well, but it does bring some challenges with it as well. But it'll be a federal issue and mandated that way on just how it rolls out.
All I would add to that is just that, I mean, the challenge is for us is the refinery capacity to make the fuel. So we can grow the crop, we can grow canola, we can grow corn, whatever, but it's getting the market conditions right, that there's incentives for the producers to actually invest in the refinery capacity.
Yeah, and I think from a livestock sector input, I talked earlier about beef tallow and sustainable aviation fuel. Obviously, right now we also have health policy in the United States that is causing a resurgence in the need or want for beef tallow. We've seen that sort of help our small and very small processors, because that health policy and that drive for that and that desire for that product has allowed them to do something that had been a waste product and do more with it. And that makes those small and very small processing facilities more viable. The question we have, and kind of to what Derek was saying, is what we don't have, like particularly in Montana, to serve a Montana Renewables, for example, in Great Falls, is that with all these small and very small processors, they don't have rendering, and we don't have rendering facilities within a feasible footprint to be able to enter that market. But I'm hoping that incentivizes someone to look at that, and for us to look at those opportunities to do that, say within Montana. And that does make, and again, it feeds right into the earlier questions about supply chain resilience and breaking up a little bit of the processing sector. That's another thing that could support these small and very small processors if we could figure out ways for them to make more money off what they do. So for example, Montana, without rendering our small, very small local processors, they throw 40% of the value of every animal in a landfill because there's just nothing else to do with it. So I think, the biofuel sector for livestock, particularly with Montana Renewables there in Montana within our footprint, presents a lot of opportunities if we can figure out how to close that gap to produce that into a viable feedstock that they can then use.
I'll just add just to depress everyone a little bit, I think a big challenge is water. We haven't talked about that much, but Oregon, most people think of Oregon, you think of rain. Yes. And increasingly we're seeing droughts. I think everyone here is seeing droughts and really a competition for water as well. So I think we have some talks about that in the next panel, and just didn't want that to not be said.
I appreciate that. And I think we'll probably come back to the water question if we have time. But the other thing I think we all recognize is that we also have a declining availability of farmland. That's been ongoing for years, whether it's through development or what have you. But in the news, as of now, a big issue is the siting of data centers, renewable energy infrastructure. So my question would be, how do we handle this increased demand for land just for data centers and also for renewable energy infrastructure?
Maybe could I go first on that one? Pardon me, getting over a bit of a cold and the tickle started. I was like, this isn't going to be good. We'll go running. Obviously, our province is encouraging like data centers and stuff, and so, but it is a fine balance to still protect our prime agriculture land, and there has to be a way to have both. So I know for me, I'm looking at it, okay, how can we have that conversation? Because it is a new space that's being looked at. It has a lot of potential, but we have to caution it to also not use up some of our best land, because when it's gone, it's gone. So I would say it's not all doom and gloom. There's a space for both, but it's a question of where and how much and what kind of safeguards you're putting in place. We already have actually some very strong regulatory rules around that, because being an oil and gas province the way we are, a lot of the regulations and environmental pieces that worked for oil and gas works for those types of regulations around the data centers and some of those alternative forms of energy as well. So it's I would say it's a fluid, fairly new, slightly complex time.
Okay. Well, this has been a difficult issue for us in Washington because, while I am a strong advocate for maintaining our croplands, our agricultural lands, let me back up, but what I've always said is that the best way to preserve farmland is make sure you have a healthy ag economy. If the farmer's doing well, you don't have as many incentives to sell. And one of the problems we have right now, and it's not so much data farms directly, but the solar farms and wind farms that are being constructed to supply power to that particular land use. And, from the farmer's perspective, and this is what makes it difficult, is saying, look, I can give up part of my land and get money for allowing solar farms to be put on my farm. And that keeps me in business. That's part of my income stream. So it's pretty hard to tell a farmer who's struggling, hey, don't do that because we want to preserve farmland. So we've got to, again, focus on the economic bottom line for the farmer and say, we can help make you stable enough in your farming activity to not need to turn to another source of income to keep you in business.
Yeah, I'll just make a couple comments. Obviously, we have a major data center coming into province of Saskatchewan being constructed, as we see, just outside the city of Regina. That I think took up about 200 and some acres of farmland, and you know, you're seeing that. I think what I've seen over the past few decades in my role in rural municipal government, if you look at every major city, I can say for Canada for sure, but probably even most of the Midwest United States, every city is sitting on prime agriculture land. Every one of them. There isn't one that is not sitting on the best agriculture land in whatever jurisdiction they're in. And they're growing. And they're growing exponentially. I'll just look at Saskatoon, one of the fastest growing cities in Canada. Just in the last 10 years, a whole urban sprawl of 35, 40,000 people just out on, and just keeps growing out on the northeast side of Saskatoon, taking some of the prime agriculture land. Regina the same way. Edmonton, Calgary, you look at them all, they're taking prime agriculture land for urban sprawl, and it is what it is. And so I think we're probably losing more that way than we're losing in any other entity that people are talking about right now. And I think it's unfortunate, but that's what's happening. I think what we've done from an ag perspective is try and find ways to increase yields in the crops we're growing. And I know there'll probably be a water issue or water question coming, and there's going to be an issue around that. I'll just say from Saskatchewan's perspective, our irrigation is growing by between 20 and 25,000 acres every year. And it's a program under the Ministry of Agriculture that we actually assist in that through some of our SCAP money. That's just kind of what's happening in that perspective because we have opportunities around that as well.
Yeah, data centers is obviously, I'll just reiterate, a big issue in Montana right now. There are several projects that are underway and approved in certain areas of the state. Obviously, just like we've said, they're in very rural agricultural based areas. A lot of controversy around that. I think what we struggle with, and Montana's an example, we're very natural resources, oil, gas, mining dependent, as well as tourism. You know, I just think we struggle to find balance between all these things in Montana. We obviously, you probably know, and one thing I'm very personally involved in is lots of battles about whether our prime productive land is going to be used for conservation purposes, or is it going to be used for production-oriented food production purposes. We struggle with finding the balance on that. We struggle with finding the balance on how we diversify our economy and keep our, you know, actually our number one export is our kids, and there's a desire to keep our kids home. And that means we have to diversify our economy. That means we have to find new industries to bring in to have high wage, high skilled jobs within the state. But then that means we need more development because they need housing. I mean, all these things, I think data centers for us is just the next iteration of a struggle we've been fighting for decades, and trying to find the balance between how do we keep our rural character and integrity? How do we keep our productive lands productive and keep providing food? And I would say also provide raw materials and minerals for the nation, because that's very important to Montana, but also deal with these other competing challenges that we have for those resources. And I wish I had the answer to it. I wish I knew how we could balance all those things and make everyone happy in that. But data centers has certainly just been something that's in Montana has just been added to a much bigger stack that already existed.
And I would just quickly add, everything the same again, little sister to Washington. We're very similar, and what Derek said, I would mirror exactly. The only thing I would add, I think, in the discussion, so Oregon has pretty strong land use regulations. We have urban growth boundaries around all of our cities, forcing them to plan that sprawl, which I think is really positive, but obviously creates a lot of political excitement and discussion. But the one thing that I feel like we don't talk about enough, and we're seeing this really acutely in Oregon, is range ground or pasture. It's not protected the same way as high class 4 and 5 soils in terms of farmland. But we're losing it to renewable energy developments, but also to wildfire. And so trying to bring back that rangeland and pasture ground is a real challenge, and something that the cost, sometimes just even the cost to re-fence on these range grounds that have been destroyed by wildfire is astronomical to the producer. And so we're losing that capability.
Okay, with the interest of time, I'm going to ask another question, and then we'll save some time for some closing comments at the end. Something that's, you brought up, Lindsay, it's very relevant. With increased demand for water, how do we, as jurisdictions, address the strains on our regional water systems? Who wants to go first? 5 minutes.
I'll make it short, quick. Apparently, I'm going to keep coughing. So, I mean, we have a fair bit of irrigation, especially in the southern end of our province. And so we've invested a significant amount of money towards, oh, there's my irrigation people. Towards the maintenance, first of all, and the upkeep of all of those systems. Plus, we're looking at developing some other sites, which I get to learn about in like less than a month. So you're only going to get the high level conversation on water conservation, but it's actually really important to our province. It's which is why like significant dollars going towards it, especially because we have to preserve what we have there, but how can we get it out? Because that helps our producers as well, right? So there's the cost of the aging infrastructure, but then how do we build up the new and put in some new infrastructure, whether it's a reservoir or dam or whatever, right? So we're doing all kinds of impact studies on it to figure out best location. How did I do? That was, like I said, high level, but it's you can't not talk about water and conservation of the water that we have and how to maximize what we have.
So back in 2006, our state legislature provided us a gift. I mean, we've got, and I'll elaborate. We've got, if you think about Washington State, just cut it. You go down the crest of the Cascades. We have a dry side, the eastern part of the state, and a wetter side, the western part of the state. On the dry side, we have areas that receive less than 9 inches of total water equivalent per year, or less sometimes. So without irrigation, we've got about 2 million acres of irrigated farmland. We wouldn't have an ag industry. 94% of our cropland is on that dry side of the state, on the east side. The legislature back in 2006 created the Columbia River Water Supply Development Act, and it directed the state's water agency, the Department of Ecology, to aggressively, and this is from the legislation, aggressively pursue development of new water supply for both in-stream and out-of-stream uses. And that's been the standard in effect for the east side of the state since 2006. And just within the first, between 06 and 2015, we made available an additional 394,000 acre feet of water. An acre foot, by the way, is like if you took from goal line to goal line on a U.S. football field, it'd be a 1 foot of water over that. So 394,000 new acre feet of water. That's the kind of program. This grow the you can't survive on a zero sum game where for someone to get water, someone else to lose water. You got to be aggressive in growing the pie. Surface storage, aquifer storage, conservation, whatever acquisitions, whatever it takes to get that water available. Be direct about it. The state legislature originally appropriated $200 million to fund new water projects for Eastern Washington, and they've every biennium after that 200 million ran out, they've come up with additional money. Thank you, Representative Dye. And it's been extraordinarily successful, and I think you have to look at it this way. You got to grow the pie.
Yeah, I guess from our perspective at Saskatchewan, we do have an irrigation plan for expansion over the next 10 years. On that side of it, we're quite fortunate in Saskatchewan. We have probably one of the largest water reservoirs in North America. I know Fort Peck is right there and a few others, but Diefenbaker is 225 kilometers long, which is about 130 some miles. To give you relevance on the volume of water, 1 meter of water in Lake Diefenbaker will sustain a community of 300,000 people for more than 15 years. That's the volume of water that's in there, and that's where our irrigation expansion is planned for. In Canada, they just announced, we were just at our federal, provincial, territories first ministers meeting here last week, and the federal minister announced a national food strategy and national food security plan of billions of dollars invested over the next 10 years into that side of it. I'm hopeful that irrigation expansion could be part of that, because if you're looking for food security, you just have to look at wherever there's irrigation. That's where your high value crops are growing, your vegetables and your fruits and things like that. So, and we're starting to see that growth in our province as well. As we all know, all those crops need rotation, and most of them need either a 3 or a 4 year rotation. So, like I know potatoes, you can only grow them on that quarter once every 4 or 5 years, so you got to have the cereal, grains, or other crops in there in that rotation side of it as well. So there's opportunities around all of that. So that's our goal, and hopefully we can get on that. But that is this year. I can tell you, the east side of the province, I wish we could move some of that water, because some of them have had 15 to 20 inches of rain just in the last month and a half, and it's not a good sight over there.
I wish we were as far ahead Montana as some other states are. I just would reiterate, we do have an aging water infrastructure. Folks here are probably some familiar with the St. Mary's Canal issue that we had here, and I'm thankful for federal and state government and others for how quickly they responded and getting water back into that system. But just one incident like that affected people for hundreds of miles downstream in the Milk River area in northern Montana across the High Line. And we have aging infrastructure all over the state that we worry about. And in addition, we have a need for more storage. It's difficult, I'll say, from a standpoint dealing with the conservation side of the house when you start talking about water storage and adding water storage and adding dams and what the impacts of that are. Those become very, very hard conversations in today's world. But we have definitely a need, as Derek was talking about in Washington, to add to our supply. We've got a lot of straws being poked in the ground in Montana as we continue to grow and develop. And right now, I do believe from a political rhetoric, it is being viewed in our state capital as a zero-sum game, that if development gets more water, ag gets less water, so on and so forth. And we are in desperate need in Montana of much more proactive thinking around that. So I should be looking to our neighbors to see how they're getting those things done.
Well, I want to give everybody an opportunity to make some closing comments. That clock right there is totally wrong. We got 10 minutes. So yeah, if everybody on the panel would want to just give us some closing comments, and I'd really also like to hear local crop conditions and reports. I'd like to know what are conditions like in the Willamette Valley. Are we going to get $4,000 steer calves this fall? And hear what the panel has to say on that. Go ahead. Lindsay.
I'll go first. So growing conditions are pretty great in most areas of the state. We're doing really well. It's still early though. Oregon and the Cascades didn't get much snow at all. And that's pretty unique for us. So we'll see some of our later harvesting crops. I think we've run out of water in a few places in the state, and that will really impact us. The Willamette Valley is very well known for our wines, our grass seed, our hazelnuts. Hazelnuts are great. It's rare that we have kind of more than 2 years of any commodity that has good prices. And cattle and hazelnuts have been good for 2 years. So I probably just jinxed us, sorry. But those are continuing to stay high, as well as blueberries and cherries are big crops for us, and they're looking really good this year. Last year was the biggest pear crop ever in history. There's been a lot of impacts. I would say the biggest challenge that we're seeing across the state this year at this very time is really pest pressure. We have constant pest pressure, as you all know. Fruit crops are notoriously difficult. But I think given where we are in a trade setting, that is even more difficult for farmers to manage. So many of our exportable crops, our high value crops, have really, really strict phytosanitary requirements. And it's really, really difficult and expensive to keep those markets open, in terms of being able to be free from a wide variety of pests, both production pests as well as new invasive species. And so, I think that's probably one of our biggest struggles going forward. Our legislature has not really planned for that. I would echo your comments a bit on water as well, but certainly something that we continue to see is crop failures or major damage from pests that we know are around, but we have different weather conditions and other things, and it's very difficult to keep up on it. And so that's something that we're talking about a lot in the legislature, and how can the government support farmers, but also it's sometimes a bit expensive for the government to do that work. So how can we partner with industry to know what those pests are, what's coming, and do that survey work? So.
Well, again, just thank you all for being here today, and thank you for the opportunity to share. It's always great to be here at PNWER and be with this group and see people that I get to see every year or every other year in coming to this event over the past decade, and those relationships that have been built. I think, back to an earlier question and a closing comment I would make would be about, the power of the relationships that are built here. It's through this experience that I've learned, and tell our producers in Montana and tell our delegation, our federal delegation, that we have a lot more in common with Alberta than we do Florida when it comes to livestock production in Montana. And so when you're developing national policies, that sometimes gets lost, at least on the U.S. side, right? To understand that, I was talking with David earlier, up in his area, the border might as well not even be there, and how people live their lives and how they do their business between northeastern Montana and Saskatchewan. There's family relationships on both sides, and that gets lost a lot of times in the federal conversations when we're being very place-based, I'll say, in our thinking, nation-based in our thinking. And so that would be my encouragement as an opportunity, is how do we get the vast majority of our nations to see the special relationship that we have, and how do we protect that, and how that's just very, very important for both of our nations and the people who live on either side of the border. And if you want a clear example of that, look at the struggles that Texas feedlots have had since the Mexican border closed down, and several have gone out of business. And you understand what what the power of those relationships and those regional relationships are. As far as a quick conditions report, we've finally gotten rain across a lot of areas of Montana. However, it's a little too late for a lot of our industry to adjust to because we knew we were coming into a year where we had record level snow capture up in the mountains. For those of you, some of you probably have visited Bozeman, Montana a lot. It was the first year since the 1940s that the Highlight Reservoir above Bozeman, Montana did not fill. So it was just very, very historic low snow levels. We've had several areas of the state, northeast Montana, around the Scobie, Plentywood, that area of Montana, southwest Montana, Dillon, Montana, which is where most of our cattle are in Montana, or one of our big areas of cattle. And then, of course, the Rocky Mountain front, up the Front Range of Rocky Mountains towards the Blackfoot Indian Reservation. We've had those have just been systemic dry areas for years, but we finally have gotten some rain in those areas. We've finally gotten some optimism this season, but it's probably been too late for people to widely adjust to that. Plus, with the prices and markets that we're seeing, it's not really incentivizing build back. I would say we're probably 30% of the cattle inventory we were 6 or 7 years ago, and I don't see an incentive for producers to really try to grow that based on the market opportunities they have, and also just uncertainty about what forage is going to be. Although we're thankful for that rain, I think the last few years has made everybody just very, very cautious in making big, bold decisions about herd rebuilding within the state of Montana. And I wish I could speak to the crop conditions, but I don't spend a lot of my time thinking about that, other than forage quality this year is much better than it's been in a long time, and we're very thankful for that.
Yeah, I'll keep it brief. I guess I'll ask PNWER one thing. I think at the end of this session, I think you heard it pretty loud and clear that the provinces and territories and the states represented here are very adamant that they want to see USMCA and CUSMA continue. I would hope that a letter could come out of PNWER, signed hopefully by the governors and the premiers of this organization, to our federal counterparts, asking for that agreement to be renewed. And I'm hopeful that we can see something come out of PNWER on that side of it. And that's why Derek and I are both here as a result of that. Crop conditions in Saskatchewan are actually really good, other than where we've had extensive rain. It's really jeopardized and hindered obviously the pulse side. The lentils don't like getting their feet wet, and they've gotten their feet pretty wet this year. And in some cases, even the canola crops are hurt by it. But for the most part, the crops in Saskatchewan look pretty good.
Well, I'd echo Minister Marit's comments about USMCA CUSMA. Extraordinarily important. We've got to make sure it stays in place. We can improve on it, but it's got to be there for us to have a stable trading block. As far as crops in Washington, cherry crop, lower elevation this point, a higher elevation yet to come. Good crop, about just kind of what you want, the optimum, where it's not too big of a crop that it depresses prices, but the quality was high as well. So that's very encouraging. Biggest challenge we have is in the Yakima Valley of Washington, which is one of our most productive ag regions. We're going through the 4th year of drought in that valley. I live in that valley, by the way. So the 4th year of drought. The producers, the irrigation districts and Bureau of Reclamation do an extraordinary job in terms of stretching what water is available. But it's still kind of early to know whether or not there's going to be problems the latter part of the growing season. It's one of our top apple and pear and cherry producing regions in the state. And so water supply, again, extraordinarily important on that dry side of the state where there's very little precipitation that occurs. Finally, I just want to thank PNWER, thank the panelists. Gosh, what a great conversation. And I just love being able to interact with our Canadian counterparts in the provinces. I look forward to being in Calgary in September for the Tri-National Accords and continue this conversation there. So thank you.
Yeah. First of all, I agree. Thank you, everybody, for, first of all, coming here and then having us on the panel to have this discussion. But most importantly, thank you for being here. The conversations that we're having here, it's really important. It gets received back to the higher levels
on both of our sides of our governments to affirm exactly how important this collaboration is between one another and how important CUSMA and USMCA is. I'll echo that because we really need everyone to be vocal on that and to give a bit of push on it. Devil's in the details. That's not the part we need to worry about, but we need them to renew it. There's just no question about that. And in terms of, well, the farmer in me really doesn't like to tempt Mother Nature by talking about conditions because we're like a month out from a lot of them harvesting. We have a lot of great looking crops. We've had some areas with way too much rain, so unseeded acres or underwater acres. It's the typical mixed bag. Everything overall is looking good. In terms of our cattle, we're seeing some of the highest prices, which is really good for our cattle producers because they had some tough years. It also means that a lot of them are holding on to now, their heifers and stuff to rebuild their herds. I don't think that's a bad thing. I think that's a good thing. That's a great sign. And quite frankly, they deserved it. I always say everyone takes their turn in ag, when one crop isn't doing that good that year, their yields are the next one. So we always say we all take their turns, and right now it's our cattle guys' turn. So us grain guys will buckle down for a little bit and hope that harvest goes as well, because so far overall it's looking good. So thanks again, everyone, and I will say I hope you have a great rest of your conference.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for hanging in there with this very important session. I may be a bit biased, but there's no more noble calling than feeding the world. And ag is up to the challenge, and I hope you see that with our panel. So if we could please take a minute and thank our panel.